And speaking of Donald J. Trump, no one better to break it all down with than my good friend Mike Davis. Mike is the founder. He's head honcho of the Article 3 Project and the Internet Accountability Project, where I am also counsel and policy advisor myself. And Mike is an all-around great right-wing social media troll and a keyboard warrior and a legal warrior for the former president of the United States. Mike, thanks so much for joining us, my friend.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So, Mike, why don't we zoom out a little bit here? We did this yesterday with our mutual friend, Will Scharf, when we spoke with him here on WIOD. I think it's important to not get lost in the weeds and to not go necessarily case by case, New York, Georgia, Florida, this deadline, this motion, that. Tell us what's actually happening. What is the Democrat lawfare complex here actually trying to do when it comes to Donald Trump?
Well, they impeached President Trump twice for nonsense. They've indicted him 4 times for non-crimes. They're trying to bankrupt him and his businesses for non-fraud and for bogus defamation lawsuits where they changed the law just to get Trump on this defamation lawsuit. They're trying to kick Trump off the ballot, or they tried to kick Trump off the ballot. If you can't beat him, just throw him off the ballot. They would rather have President Trump bankrupted, kicked off the ballot, and die in prison rather than face him on November 5th, 2024, because these Democrats fear American voters.
So it really is that simple, right? I mean, they do fear that the median American has had enough of just the epic poop show, for lack of a better description, that we've been enduring over these past few years. The 9.1% inflation reaching that 40-year high back in the summer of 2022, and the botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, and the war in Ukraine, and the Hamas pogrom in Israel, just not the southern border, for goodness sake. I mean, it really is that simple, and I agree with you that they are just utterly terrified here. But Mike, they're going to get hoisted on their own petard, aren't they? I mean, don't you have enough faith in the American people that they're just going to see through this ruse and ultimately come home to Donald Trump, partially at least due to the fact that they're doing all this stuff?
Well, that's why the Article 3 Project has been the tip of the spear defending President Trump since the unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful home raid in Mar-a-Lago 18 months ago in the office of former president for presidential records that President Trump is allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act. And we have done over 3,000 media hits, including this one. Will Chamberlain has been hugely helpful as well. And we have been out there constantly defending against this Democrat lawfare and election interference, because I keep telling people this is so much bigger than Donald Trump. He is a billionaire, former and likely future president of the United States. This is awful what they're doing to him, but he has the resources to fight back. He has the resources to turn lemons into lemonade. He has the ability to do it. What about everyday Americans? What about they're going after, not only are they going after Trump, they're going after his top aides. They're going after his top aides and eviscerating 250 years of constitutional executive privilege and throwing in prison Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon, 2 top aides. They're going after Trump's lawyers, eviscerating attorney-client privilege, and they're threatening to throw his attorneys in prison, like Jeff, or just bar his attorneys and throw them in prison, like Jeff Clark. They're trying to disbar John Eastman out in California. John Eastman's a brilliant attorney. He went to your alma mater, the University of Chicago Law School.
We were just talking about John Eastman actually about 25 minutes ago or so ago on the show. But I mean, I guess to my next question for you, Mike, John and Jeffrey Clark, who's being prosecuted. They're trying to disbar Jeffrey Clark in D.C. and they're trying to prosecute him in Georgia. I mean, this ultimately. I mean, I'm a lawyer. You're a lawyer. They're committing war on the legal profession in America, aren't you? I mean, Mike, when I went to law school, they said you have to zealously advocate for your clients. They're trying to criminalize the practice of law, are they not?
Yeah, I mean, think about how dangerous this argument is that John Eastman and Jeff Clark were advocating what they thought was a fringe legal theory. So they're trying to disbar them and even imprison them for this. Remember that Thurgood Marshall argued that courts should ignore more than 50 years of the Supreme Court's controlling precedents in Plessy versus Ferguson. He didn't get disbarred. He got put on the Supreme Court after winning Brown versus Board of Education 9-0 and reversing Plessy versus Ferguson, overturning Plessy versus Ferguson. That's what you want lawyers to do. You want lawyers to make these legal arguments zealously on behalf of their clients. And as long as there is a good faith basis to bring these arguments, you should do it. You could actually get disbarred if you don't, right? And it's insane that, remember, Congress amended the Electoral Count Act of 1887 after the 2020 election. So obviously there was a disagreement on what the Electoral Count Act of 1887 meant back, when Trump and John Eastman and Jeff Clark were challenging the election because Congress amended the statute. And regardless, it's not a crime to object to a presidential election. It was allowed by the Electoral Count Act of 1887. It's allowed by the First Amendment. It's only a crime to object to presidential elections in third world Marxist hellholes like North Korea and Zimbabwe and now Washington, D.C. and Atlanta.
And just to reset here, we're joined by Mike Davis, who's the founder of Article 3 Project, the Internet Accountability Project. And, Mike, as we start to wrap up here, just surveying the field and looking at the two Jack Smith probes, looking at this trial with Tish James in New York, and you've got Fonnie Willis, and you've got Alvin Bragg. There's so much going on. There's so much to keep track of here. I'm not going to ask you to rank them all, but is there one or two that stand out as just being even more egregious than the others from your mind?
Well, I think that they're all very egregious. I think these are republic-ending tactics by the Democrats. This lawfare and election interference is going to lead for a legal tit for tat that is going to destroy our country. It's how the Roman Republic fell. Remember, it was the lawfare by the Senate insiders against Caesar that made him feel desperate, and so he crossed the Rubicon with his army from Gaul into Rome, and it led to a civil war and the fall of the Roman Republic. I'm not saying we're going to a civil war, but this is going to be a legal tit for tat that is very destructive to our country. It's going to destroy our country if you can just have the sitting president of the United States throw in prison his successor rather than face him in an election.
And it really is just unprecedented stuff. Mike, I've been throwing around the term un-American, Stalinist persecution. I've been using a lot of this lofty language this week, and I keep having to remind the listeners that I'm not just saying it. I'm not trying to get a reaction. It actually is uncharted waters that we are living in here, and it's deeply, deeply troubling stuff all around. Mike Davis is the founder of the Article 3 Project and the Internet Accountability Project, also a good personal friend. Follow him on Twitter at MRDDMIA. Mike, you're a great patriot, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Josh.